Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for Renaissance Periodization with, of course, Jared Feather, my bodyguard and, well, android I designed for, let's say, my protection, but it's really destruction of the earth. We all know that. And we are here with Bret Contreras, PhD, right? Dr. Bret Contreras. I mean,
I'm a coach, I know.
But also doctor.
I've always hated when doctors are like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's Dr. Bret Contreras. I think I earned it.
I think you've earned it. So we are here to talk about a super fun topic. Just kidding. It's a super nerdy topic. It may be fun if you have no friends like the three of us. Well, Jared and I don't have any friends. No, I don't have any friends. Jared has plenty of friends. Jared, name a friend, quick.
You. So you have a friend too.
That's so nice. Jared's actually my son. You guys already knew that. Bret, you have friends, but you also have something to talk about, something that's been on your mind, and I can intro it or you can intro it. What is it here that we're here to discuss? What do you just start rapping at us, Bret?
All right. Since I've noticed this growing trend in the industry where you got all these guys bashing exercise that we like. So now it's gotten to the point where you do a lat prayer and you get attacked for it. And I do
that doesn't work the lats.
It doesn't work the lats. And I do a seated hip abduction, and I get all these people, oh my God, that only works the piriformis LMFAO. So
true academic critique.
True academic critique.
Yeah, and so since it's kind of become this wild, wild west out there, and it's annoying when you make a post and you have, 1/10 of the comments being like, laugh my ass off, this doesn't even work that muscle. And you're like, how could it not work that? I feel it working the muscle. But they're learning from certain charlatans that they call themselves biomechanists, but they're not biomechanists. It's the age of the self-proclaimed biomechanists that never actually studied biomechanics.
Functional anatomist.
Barely functional anatomists.
They didn't take courses for this. So they have good ideas, but they're unpolished. They're lacking education. They could be very good scientists, but they don't have the requisite education. So I created a kind of like an exercise efficiency guide. How should we go about figuring out if exercises are efficient? What criteria should we go on?
Right. Or basically another way to put it is, if there is a claim or a hypothesis that, hey, I think this exercise works this muscle, to what degree can you be certain about that? And how do you increase the degree to which you're certain about it?
Yep.
And so you have laid out an idea about how you would go in sort of different lines of evidence, and they kind of converge. And if they converge on an exercise that says from all these lines of evidence, it's probably that this exercise works this muscle, then of course there's no certainty in science, but you could say, hey, this is a pretty good bet. Whereas if you do that analysis that you're going to talk to us about in just a sec, and it comes out like maybe, then, maybe, but maybe not. And then if you do that analysis and it's like probably not, then I would just probably pick a different exercise to target that muscle. So what's on your mind, Bret? What are you thinking are the ways, the tools by which we can use to figure out, does this exercise work this muscle? Okay,
so there are kind of three categories of clues. The first category would be common sense clues. Those are things that you go by feel and things like that. They're just common sense. They don't require any tools. These are the most common that we go by. Bros, if we're talking to each other after workout.
I'm not a bro. Don't point at me like that. I'm a scientist.
You're a bro.
Damn it.
We're bros.
We're definitely bros.
I always think it's funny if people heard us talk, like without the camera on.
Yeah.
Jared would be like, dude, this give me a sick pump. Like, that's how we talk.
Yeah, bro.
We aren't like, I experienced extreme cell swelling.
Extreme cell swelling. They're like, which cells? Are you okay?
Oh, I love it.
But yeah, we'd be like, dude, you should try this
100%.
pendulum squat. My God, my quads. And we'd be like, and it didn't hurt my knees, or like, my knees feel really good with it. We're bros. That's what, we have that common terminology. So these are the things bros talk about. The problem with common sense clues is that you don't have numerical data. It's nice to have numbers. I do a preacher curl, you do a concentration curl, and you do a dumbbell incline curl. Which is best? How would we ever know that? We would know that if we had a longitudinal study. That's the third category of clue. So the second category is numerical clues. This is how you provide numbers you bring numbers to the table. The problem with these is they're rare because they require biomechanical tools. These are things sports scientists use. And then the third category,
laboratory shit.
yeah. And then the third category would be longitudinal clues. This is the most powerful evidence. The problem is, when will there ever be a study looking at the dumbbell incline curl versus the concentration curl versus the preacher curl? That will probably never happen in our lifetime.
The government needs to really seriously reprioritize shit. Cancer screenings, gone.
Gone.
Genomics research, gone.
Obesity.
Military defense, cut in half at least. Obesity, whatever. People need biceps.
Gains.
Gains economy.
Fund the gains. So that's the problem that Mike just alluded to, is that we're never going to have the funding. Sports science will always have way more mechanistic studies, way more acute studies than longitudinal studies. What I mean is, if you're trying to be prolific as a researcher, you want to publish, okay, you can do like one training study a semester, and it's a pain in the butt. You know, if you do a 12-week long training study, that takes the whole semester. Normally you use your students. You got to get right to it. You got to introduce, like familiarize them with it, do the study, analyze the data, write it up. That's a whole semester. You can do one of those per, usually, if you're a professor, and they're very involved. Yeah. If you ever done a training study, you get dropouts, it's so frustrating. These are always going to be so limited, the actual training studies. And so in a perfect world, we would have hundreds of studies on every exercise. Mike, we still flexing your calves?
Maybe. I'm sitting next to Jared. I kind of get some calf energy. I start feeling my shit.
We would have 100 studies on every exercise, and we would look at every variation of that exercise.
And we have to replicate the studies too.
They'd be replicated. They'd have different populations. You'd have newbies, advanced. You'd have tall people, short people. You'd have old people, young people, male versus female. You'd have all different types of studies.
People who grew up without male role models.
I'd be in that one.
You'd have different combinations of volumes, frequencies, and loads and effort and things like that. But we don't. We will never really have that. And ideally, you'd have so many studies that you'd have review papers written that would just, hey, I want to know about
a meta-analysis of the biceps.
You just want to know, what's the best way to work the biceps? You read a review paper. Here's the 3,000 studies just summarized into one nice, neat paper that organizes and graphically illustrates it all. That doesn't exist. That will not exist in our field. So we have to go down the chain. Since we don't have the longitudinal research, we don't have the longitudinal clues that tell us, like if there were 20 studies showing, look, the concentration curl beats out the dumbbell incline curl and the preacher curl,
mine wins.
Okay. We would do mostly that. If there were all the training studies ever and there were 50 of them and they all pointed to that, then it would help us develop the mechanisms too. We'd be like, why does the concentration curl work better than the dumbbell incline curl? We could start honing on it. But we don't have that. We will never have that. The funding will never be there. Even 200 years from now, it'll be the same way. And then we won't even need sports science research because we'll just take pills to look however we want.
Well, I want to be a robot by then.
Yeah.
Hopefully 200
We'll just
years.
be robots. So let's go through the common sense clues. These are the ones people use the most. Number one is feel and sensation. Bodybuilders have talked about this forever. You know your body. Your body is different than his body and my body. So why would you not listen to that? We're smart people. We can tell what works.
You're smart. Jared and I, we're people. Barely.
So we can tell when you do a triceps exercise, you can tell I feel this working more than this exercise. Maybe it suits my body better, or you know what I mean?
Yep.
But you can feel. We're all, you know your body well if you pay attention to it. Some circles are saying you shouldn't pay attention to feel.
That's really strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
I can understand where they're coming from. They're saying, look, feel can lead you the wrong way, or feel is everything. Maybe that's not true. But to completely wash that away as nothing is kind of like, well, if you say eyewitness accounts are not super powerful evidence, that's true. What about 1,000 eyewitness accounts of the same event? That starts to be pretty convincing. So I think maybe those people at the extremes are saying people abuse the feel and then just like maybe they're making it up in their heads, maybe they're very unique. But to say that it doesn't matter at all, which I've heard people say, that's kind of strange. Like,
I mean, have you ever been doing an
like
exercise that works you so well at that particular time? You're like, I feel like I'm going to tear my freaking muscle.
Oh,
like,
yeah. Well, like if you do skull crushers properly and nice and deep, you feel your triceps pulling apart. You're like, someone's like, that doesn't work triceps. You're like, okay.
I've had that on hack squats one time I was doing. I'm like, I think I'm going to stop now. If I go to true failure, I think I'll be crippled.
Pop off.
You know, something bad might happen. So, yeah. So the feel and the sensation, basically, that's important. Is it all that? No. Every one of these are a piece of the puzzle. That's what's important.
Exactly.
I'm going to throw 20 puzzle pieces at you. They're all important. You're going to have way more of these puzzle pieces from this category, though. So the feel and sensation, we can all do that. We can all do an exercise and pay attention. Similar to feel and sensation is the burn. You know, if you're doing exercise and you feel the burn, chances are it works that muscle well. And then the next category is similar to the pump. Not category, the next criteria is the pump.
Of that category.
Yeah. If you do an exercise and get a pump for that muscle, how could it not work that muscle well?
Well, you know, it's interesting because they used to say, I remember when I was going to school in 1896, go ahead, make fun of my age.
It's okay.
It's okay. What's okay?
That you're 1,000.
That I'm almost a grandfather.
Yeah.
So literally in the early 2000s, I remember reading like position stands published by reputable authorities that would say that, well, because, you know, Arnold was saying back in the 70s, the pump is everything. It's a literal quote, by the way. And they were saying, well, actually, the pump is just increased blood flow. It doesn't have any relationship to muscle growth. And then, of course, 5 years later, we find out that the pump has been directly connected multiple times to not only evidential growth, but actually mechanistic growth through self-swelling. So it kind of looks bad to those people that said, well, feelings don't matter. Like, well, now we found out there's actual mechanisms for that.
So the pump, in my opinion, very important. Okay. DOMS, the next criteria is DOMS. If you do a bunch of sets, you want to know what area of muscle works, do 10 sets. And then the next day or 2 days later, pay attention to where you're sore. Yeah. You know, that's another common sense clue. You don't need any instruments for that. You just pay attention to where you're sore. All right. Then you have tension. There's kind of two types of tension. One is visual. If you train a lean person, you can see what muscles are being worked. You know what I mean?
Like, you go like this with a fly and the pecs do all this feathery stuff, and you're like, the pecs aren't working. For sure.
Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. Or like someone doing face pulls and they're shredded. You see their upper back muscles just, you know, you can see all the details. So that kind of gives you a good indication. Or even if they're wearing leggings, you can see people's if they're lean, you can see their glutes, their quad through the leggings. But there's also tension by palpation. And this is if you're, you know, you can palpate yourself or you can palpate your training partners, things like that. You feel their glutes when they're doing a 45-degree hyper. They get rock hard, okay?
And they can feel them too.
You can
just
feel
a double confirmation.
Right. Sure. You can feel it getting rock solid. That's generating tension, okay? Now, a couple more. The next one is fiber directions and joint actions. Like, we know that
is that all of biomechanics? I'm just kidding. That's what a lot of people think biomechanics.
That's how some people just go by this one piece. Yeah. They just go by functional anatomy and joint act. They know that, you know, we know that you know, the biceps flexes the elbow, and so, you know, but sometimes it's more complicated than that. Yeah. Sometimes there's not a muscle well suited for a particular joint action, like spinal rotation, hip internal rotation. What muscle has a perfect line of force for that? You know, you don't always have this perfect muscle that's perfectly.
So your body has to kind of cobble together a motor program, a bunch of different muscles.
You know, like in the instance of spinal rotation, no muscle gets really high EMG in terms of MVIC, in terms of maximum capacity. You don't have super high activations of the core muscles, but it creates more compressive force than trunk flexion, trunk extension, trunk lateral bending. Trunk rotation creates the highest compressive forces because there's no perfectly rotary, like, that spirals around and you contracting it just. So you use a lot of the muscles. You use obliques and multifidi and, you know, erector.
And the rotors are in the spine, but they're teeny tiny. Yeah, and if you get jacked rotors, it doesn't matter because no one's ever going to see them. It's just kind of like a huge robbery. You know? I actually have a claim I have the world's most jacked rotors, but you can't see them. So. You have to trust me.
I trust you.
I don't trust.
So functional anatomy is very important, just like all of these are important. It's very important, but a lot of times people rely on drawings, man-made drawings of muscles, whereas ideally you'd have like cadavers, but even cadavers are dehydrated. You go to a lab, that doesn't look like someone's
It
glutes.
looks really sad.
It's stringy, flattened out, dehydrated muscles. And also, you look at a muscle when it's flexed, you know? For example, you go look at the glute max when people are contracting them. They're mostly horizontal. They're not at this 45-degree angle that people say, you know?
Well, because pronation angles change slightly when you're using the muscle. And the angle of the muscle to the joints and bones can change significantly as the bones and joints move.
Yeah. So there's functional anatomy and joint action. That's important, but it's one piece of the puzzle. Okay. And then finally, we've got physiques of lifters that prioritize the lift. And this is, I always use the example of, we used to not have, up until several years back, I wasn't aware of a single study that looked at glute hypertrophy for squats.
Yeah.
There was like an elderly study looking at blood flow restriction, and there was like study on leg press, study on other, but not an actual hypertrophy study. So the like rigorous scientists would be like, we have no evidence that squats work the glutes. Whereas you'd be like, look at Olympic weightlifters, they're squatting. Now you could say it's not the squats, it's the clean and jerks and the snatches, but
Still squatting.
Yeah, that
Right.
strains credulity real quick.
but
The hip extension part that the squat also does that grows the glutes.
yeah,
Weird.
you know, if you look at Olympic weightlifters tend to have jacked quads
For sure.
and nice glutes, you can probably conclude it's a pretty good glute and quad exercise because they're doing it 3 times a week,
Exactly.
you know? Okay, so that's the common sense clues. These are the most common clues, right? These are what we use most often. These are what you're going to hear lifters talking about.
Yeah.
Now, the next category you need, I'm going to go through this quickly, but because I might be able to use EMG because I bought my own, or like if I bought my own force plate.
I have a similar electrical device that I put on one part of my body, but it doesn't measure anything.
A little
Okay.
different.
Sorry.
Gotcha.
But please continue.
It stimulates.
Yes, that it does.
It doesn't annihilate.
Yes, it's ruining my personal life.
Um,
It doesn't. Sometimes it annihilates. I can't turn the knob up too much. Sometimes you need annihilation. I'm done. I swear to God.
So these are okay. So the most popular one in sports science is EMG.
For sure.
Now you have wire and surface EMG. Wire is more accurate, but it's invasive. You have to kind of put a little needle through you have to fish it into the muscle. So
I
surface is
can't
more
believe
common.
people sign up for that shit.
Yeah, me either.
They're like, what's the study design? Like, well, we're going to be putting a little wire in your muscle. Like, ah, sweet, sign me up.
Do this.
$50.
I did it just to see.
Of course.
I wanted to see.
You would pass out, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah, especially when I contracted.
Oh,
I feel
hell
it.
no. I don't want any of that shit.
That would hurt
How did
so
it
bad.
feel? Did it feel like anything?
It hurt a little bit.
Shit.
I don't think you, if you're like working out, you would feel it much. But
Oh no.
But,
It's like turning
you know,
pale. Like, ooh.
these have their limitations. So this is what I told you. You know, you guys, you recently sent me this video and published journal
Which
article
video? I
of,
send you lots of videos.
of Andrew Vygotsky.
Oh, I see. Yes.
His recent critique of EMG.
Yeah.
And I told you I wanted to tell you what Andrew said because Andrew's my good friend. He used to be my intern, and I told him at that time, you look up to me right now because you're 20, 21, 20. Right. In like 3 years, you'll be so much smarter than me. You know that. You can tell. I was a teacher for 6 years. Sure. You know what students are so far above you. And now he's like the smartest guy in our field. But that doesn't mean I don't disagree with him, but I defer to him because he is way smarter than me. I said, okay, you just wrote this whole critique of EMG. Here's this list. I sent him this. Tell me what doesn't have flaws.
Everything is.
Which one of these don't have flaws? I love EMG. I know it's flaws, but I love, you know, I have a study that looked at single joint movements. This was by, God, way back in the, I think it was DeLuca. And it graphed tension, like actual muscle force versus EMG. It's pretty linear. I mean, it's not exact, but I sure as hell take that over
nothing.
Some guru's opinion.
For sure. And also, I think Andrew's main point there, the article is actually designed for people that are in the formal scientists publishing, for them to not use EMG as a rigorous one-to-one proxy for hypertrophy.
That was it.
But if you're using EMG as part of the puzzle piece,
Part of the puzzle
it's
piece,
totally fine. Especially you want to look for like some kind of antithetical results where like an exercise people claim works really well, but then the EMG just doesn't show it at all, or the EMG shows something you weren't expecting. That's very curious, and it would require you to look at it. It's just not a standalone thing.
For example, when I looked at chin-ups, abs through the roof, I was like, okay, something's wrong. I redid it. Then I started palpating people's abs when they do chin-ups. Holy crap. It's their ab.
You could watch people crunch too to get.
They crunch up, yeah. They
like
you do like a posterior pelvic.
I think his point was that it's like potentiating effects, kind of like calcium release. That has to happen before you can experience hypertrophy.
Sure.
So it might be measuring that, which is still, it's a potentiating factor in what happens.
It's not directly hypertrophy.
It's not direct.
It's not even direct attention.
One of his main points, and it's so funny because here's Andrew. Here's Andrew for you. One of his main points is that they have EMG has length related changes where they actually stimulate the nerve at the same intensity throughout the range of motion. One elicited twice the EMG output when you're getting the same input due to the length. And so there's length related changes. And so I said, okay, Andrew, rather than just bashing it, why is it always you guys bashing it? Why don't you figure out a correction factor? Find a correction factor then that smooths it out, and then it's accurate. And he's like, that's what he's like Russian accent. That's what I was going to do initially for my PhD until I changed professors, of course.
Oh my goodness.
Then he changed to like pain and physics, the physics of pain. That's what he's doing.
I have like a more practical pain lab in my basement, not dungeon. I was going to say dungeon. I don't know why I'd say that. Jesus.
So anyway, so EMG, very popular. I think the pendulum swung because I think I started, and I was part of that. I started coming out with EMG stuff left and right. Brad Schoenfeld and I published so much stuff, and then everyone was like, EMG shows this. And we knew that it doesn't exactly mean hypertrophy. But then I think the industry kind of goes, woo, it swings back. It should be here, but it swings the other way. The pendulum swings back. It should be in the middle. And now it's kind of, you have people saying EMG means nothing.
Right. Like, I wouldn't really go saying that.
Like, you can do a curl. You can just grab a 10-pound dumbbell, then a 20-pound, then a 30, and you look at the waveforms, and they're like exactly how you'd predict. It's a very nice piece of equipment. Anyway, okay, so there's EMG. There's also things that I've never used. There's TMG, MMG, and SMG, which tensiomyography, mechanomyography, and sonomyography. I've never used them. But I just wanted to mention those. Now, we have functional MRI. Now, some of these are used, like MRI is used in longitudinal research to look at actual muscle growth, but when you use functional MRI, it measures fluid shifts. So if you do it right after an exercise, then it looks at like metabolic stress. If you do it a couple days after exercise, it looks at muscle damage. It's basically how much fluid is retained. It's
an expensive study.
That's been correlated with hypertrophy though, in the triceps, I believe. So, but again, how many of us have MRIs are like 2 million or something? Like,
I have one at home.
You have one?
I have a few models.
So
that operate my MRI machines. The models are in charge.
Got it. Okay, then we have ultrasound, and that you can use ultrasound also to measure longitudinal growth throughout a training study. It looks at one dimension, muscle thickness. However, you can look at it right after an exercise to see how much cell swelling did you get. Did the muscle swell 20%? You know. Now you can also, these are more complicated things, right? You can take a biopsy and look at the ECM, like the extracellular matrix and Z-line disturbances. That's a measure of muscle damage.
That's called histology, right? Like a tissue analysis.
Tissue analysis, yeah. You can look at lactate and other metabolites, and also glycogen depletion. Those would kind of estimate metabolic stress. All right. You can look at creatine kinase and myoglobin levels. Those look at muscle damage. The problem is, like with the lactate and creatine kinase, so cool, you do 10 sets of squats. Well, remember that Iowa strength coach that put his guys through, this was like 2013 or something. He put his guys, they did 10 sets of 10 squats with body weight load, supersetted with 10 sets of sled pushes.
And like 5 of them got rhabdo.
13 of the players, I think, got rhabdo. Yeah. And I looked at that study.
So that's just coaching these boys up, man. I tell you what, you haven't played no football before. Sorry, I flipped into strength coach mentality.
That's really good.
So he's actually the highest paid strength coach. He's actually really good. But in this he got a little carried away here. They weren't adapted to it. If you start off with 3 sets of that and then 5, and then, but anyway, due to the repeated bout effect, he should have known. We've all done as coaches. I've had people do some of my biggest mistakes. They're taunting me like, I'm just used to training much harder than this, Bret. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'll put you, and I should have listened to myself.
I'll put you in the hospital, goddamn.
So anyway, but the problem with that is that, okay, so you have high lactate levels after an exercise. Well, we don't know, is that coming from one muscle or just all the muscles? Is it just good at working your whole body or one particular muscle? Same with, real quick, in that study, I remember writing a blog post about that study back in the day. Normal creatine kinase levels, I believe, are 200 to 400, whatever. I don't know if it's IUs or what, but
IUs, shit. I'm just kidding.
With people who exercise, it might be 1,000. This one player's levels were like 386,000. Yeah,
it's like a Dragon Ball Z power level, except in reverse.
So yeah, people can get rhabdo, and it's very dangerous because you get so much muscle damage that protein breakdown, the kidneys have to filter it. It's bad. Okay, moving on. You can look at hormones: testosterone, free test, cortisol.
And that's systemic factors.
Systemic, HGH, IGF-1, mechano growth factor. The thing is, there's this hormone hypothesis. We used to think that was really important. In the days of like Bill Kramer's research and all this stuff, everyone thought that was, hey, this squats and deadlifts jack your testosterone levels up the most.
And that's how growth is made.
It's real bad diet stuff, like growth hormone in the morning.
That's right. Yeah.
Like, don't train at this time. Don't eat at this time.
Right. They used to say don't eat after training because your growth hormone levels will go down. But growth hormone is designed to liberate fuel. So of course they would go down.
Yeah. We used to do things that's kind of like we were guruing people back then, back in the day. And I remember my first gym, I had a sheet that I'd give everyone. It was like, want your arms to grow? Squat and deadlift. This releases.
I used to say shit like that all the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's not all that. I think it matters, just not as much as people think. And then ROM, range of motion, and strain. Like you can look at how much the muscle actually stretches. What percentage. You can look at moment arms and pennation angle.
That's real biomechanics.
Yeah, where you actually measure. These are numerical. Yeah. This is like providing numerical clues to the functional anatomy perspective. And those are important in my opinion. You can calculate what percentage of the force is effective at that joint action, you know what I mean? And things like that by using like trigonometry, like SOHCAHTOA. Remember that?
I don't know any of that shit. No.
Okay, so then you have force plate research. Now, this is another thing that used to be used a lot. People would be like, well,
I've done those studies.
Jump squats are like basically a trap bar jump squat creates more force on the force plate than power clean
for a fraction of a second.
So it should be used more. My problem with that is like, I remember writing a blog post. Okay, so in that sense, quarter squats would be better than full squats.
Right.
If you have a mechanical advantage, sometimes it's better to use the descent, the exercise that's hardest.
Because you have to use less external load to generate the same intramuscular tension, and then you get more hypertrophy for less weight on the bar and less injury risk.
But you can do an exercise on a force plate. You can look at the forces, the power, the rate of force development, the impulse, the work. Those are the things we look at. I don't think it's very predictive of anything. Well,
it's great for sport performance, but maybe not
so
much.
You can look at, did it increase your performance? But can you use that to predict what's best for this exercise? I mean, think about it. Shrugs would be huge. Should all athletes be doing shrugs because they have high power output? Or sorry, high force output? I don't know. Maybe not. But anyway,
I doubt it.
Just mentioning all the tools that we use as sports scientists. Okay, so next up is the muscle, basically the force angle curves. So you have 3 curves that are created. The passive force, that's the force that's generated through stretch. Then you have the active curve, that's the force generated through contraction. Then you have the total curve, which is the sum of those two. That's an area I believe that we need to keep exploring because muscles are different. We don't know enough about that yet. I know Andrew doesn't think it's all that. Brad and I do. We think there's something to it. We know Andrew's smarter than us, but that doesn't...
Well, smart people have never been wrong, so he's right for sure.
That doesn't mean we don't investigate it. And maybe it leads to something, maybe it doesn't. However, all muscles they have different resting sarcomere lengths, different moment arms, so you get different levels of stretch, different levels of active tension throughout the range of motion. But we don't even know enough to We don't know enough right now to know if that's important. It's something we need to build upon.
But we can make Instagram posts about it pretending we know, and it sounds sciencey and
Exactly.
cool.
Especially if we throw in Titan and Hippo Yap pathway, Filament C, bag 3, like all these.
Bag 3 always sounded perverse.
Talk about them. Say random shit about them.
Bag. Give you a bag.
Okay, so then there's musculoskeletal modeling. Okay, Jared and I have used OpenSim before. That's you can use modeling to show. Now, modeling has its faults because you're relying on assumptions. You have to model the human body. It's not easy to. The musculoskeletal system is not easy to do so.
Right.
There's flaws in the system, but again, it's a puzzle piece.
We have a lot of data on that too, though, so it's pretty accurate.
Pretty accurate, but I've
Not
found,
perfect, but
I found some stuff where, like, if you go deep, like in some muscles, it'll because think about the glutes. If you go super deep, it would pass through the.
Yeah.
It doesn't wrap around.
Yes,
exactly.
they don't. I think it's the wrapping.
Yeah.
It's linear modeling. It's not.
Yeah. They don't have a wrapping mechanism sometimes, so it's not perfect. But it's to me, like EMG, it's a hell of a lot better than, Johnny Bro's opinion, who's just shouting at everyone that this exercise sucks. And then finally, a couple more. You have acute protein synthesis that's measured through biopsy. And then you have intracellular signaling. Those are things like we can look at mTOR, MAPK, AKT, calcium-dependent pathways. We can look at all those. And
Other complex words.
Brad knows this stuff well. I rely on him to know this stuff. And I try to know the biomechanics stuff. He knows the physiology.
Fuck all that shit.
But we know mTOR is important. So if mTOR goes up after this exercise, but again,
it's probably a good thing.
It's probably a good thing, but it's rare.
Right.
How many, you don't hear bros in the gym being like, no, don't do those lap prayers. They did not activate mTOR, whereas this did.
I got one like, what are you training today, bro? Like fucking mTOR, like my man.
I'm training mTOR today. I'm only going for mTOR today.
Only mTOR today.
And then the last one in this category is PAPE. It used to be called PAP, post-activation potentiation. What researchers realized was PAP, post-activation potentiation, is like the phosphorylation of the light myosin chains or something. It's not. That's only a small part of it.
It's a subset.
It's a subset, and it doesn't even correlate to the actual time points that you're getting this enhancement. So you can get enhancement for several different reasons. Basically, this is just for performance. This wouldn't be for like hypertrophy.
Right.
But if you're looking at performance, and this exercise, potentiates your performance, it's probably a good exercise for that sport.
Yep.
But again, this whole numerical clues and all the common sense clues let you generate hypotheses.
For sure.
It's just you're theorizing. Then the longitudinal clues are what measure that. So then the next category is the longitudinal clues. These are the ones where you're actually looking at hypertrophy. One kind of problem with hypertrophy research, well, all the studies have flaws. For example, there's 2 studies I'm skeptical of. One,
call out time.
You guys probably love these. Team Full ROM over here love these studies. I'm skeptical. One study by Kubo showing that full squats develop the glutes and adductors way better than, I don't know if it was half squats, but basically partials.
Yeah.
It matters how you do them. So let's say I'm on a Smith machine. I feel like my quads are going to upstage you guys right now.
They're enormous. Please put them away. Jared can't even put his quads away anymore.
Okay, let's say you're on a Smith machine and you do a Smith machine full squat. And you go all the way to here and you're upright. This is going to work your quads and glutes really well. Boom. Now let's say you're on that same Smith machine. You just go like this. You're not even working your glutes at all.
Because you're not sitting back. Yeah.
But let's say you take a low bar position.
Sit back.
I get a wide stance and I go like this. I feel this in my glutes a ton. So you don't always know how they did the study.
So real quick, I'd love to comment on that because I've been involved in like a bit of exercise science research myself, like directly being there. I've been a subject, I've been a graduate researcher, I've been above that level, et cetera. And one trippy thing is like, people will say, oh, like they studied, this exercise versus this, or this squat versus hack squat, and they'll come up with some kind of zany results sometimes. And the thing is, what is it? Like, it's like if you really like hot dogs or sausages and you really like laws, don't ever watch them get made because
100%.
you'll never consume laws
Exactly.
again. I guess.
When
But,
you've done, yeah.
like sometimes they'll be like, this is a squat. And you'll see like some Harry Potter ass motherfucking undergraduate doing something.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's a squat. He did it. And I'm like, oh shit.
So-
like that's really bastardized version. It's not doing the thing justice.
So that's why I trust my studies, because I know they were carried out well, because I'm a strength coach for so many years. I trust my research. I don't always trust because, funny, one time Andrew and I were we were looking up someone's a researcher posted something. He goes, why is that name familiar? He's like, Andrew's like an idiot savant. He's like a Rain Man, you know.
Does he
remember that
gamble?
name.
Because we can make a lot of money off that.
Dude.
We could bring
Bring
him
We're
in.
literally in Vegas right now.
Bring him
Andrew,
right now.
stop what you're doing. Biomechanics, whatever. Get over here.
Stop saving the world and get over here and help us make money. So he went and found the researcher. He found their Instagram, and then we looked at the study. And in the study, they say we did these according to the methods of like hip thrust, according to Bret Contreras' initial paper published, like hip thrust technique papers published in
I
SCJ.
can see where this is going.
Then you looked at the researcher posted a video, and it was like on Instagram, like testing 1RM, testing for my study. Chest was up, they weren't locking out. It was like not the same form. So just because they said it was, and that's where, so this is a flaw not just with longitudinal research, because these same errors would exist, these same errors that would exist if they were measuring short-term acute research too. You don't know how they do it.
This is why I don't like when people are saying they're performing studies and there's no actual data on their studies. Because it's like, people will come to me and say, this exercise doesn't work the glutes or doesn't do this. Like, we love sumo deficit deadlifts. And I'll watch somebody do them, and I'm like, that's everything about that is just a sumo deadlift with your ass way up in the air. So you have to give them actual cues, which sometimes I'm not even sure that these other researchers, that aren't actually researchers, are even familiar with the cues.
A lot of researchers don't even lift weights, bro.
Yeah, so they're like you need to get your hips under you. You need to actually use the glutes. Like, you're getting the sumo from the hips, not from the stance. Like shit like that. And I don't think people would say that kind of stuff.
No, it's probably a 50-50. 50% of guys.
Sure.
Guys like us who came from weightlifting, then they go into research, they want to publish on. But then like another 50% don't.
Well,
they don't know what they're doing.
My issue is that some people do know what they're doing, and they use that to their advantage to make their study look.
Well, like, you should know better.
Yeah.
Well, there was the one guy
academically dishonest, except for the people that I'm talking about. They're not actually in academia.
No, I like there's the story about the one researcher who he wanted the results to come out a certain way, so he was.
What did Vygotsky call that? What did Andrew call that? And in medical science, you have something to your studies. It's where you're intentionally trying to. I can't remember what he said.
It's a researcher the research is.
That's terminology.
Unknowingly doing. Yeah, exactly. I know. There's a term for it.
But some people do the opposite, and it's very academically dishonest.
Yeah. So yeah, you had that one guy who I think eventually just started making up his own data. But
my man.
Right.
But before then,
collecting data is hard.
Before then, it was like he would want this group to win out. So
exactly.
Before they got in the MRI, he'd give them, load them up on creatine for a few days and high carb them and make sure they're super hydrated, because that comes out.
What's the end game for that? Like, what are you?
Well, that's the thing. But there aren't that many. There are only a couple that we know of that are, corrupt like rats. Like they turn to the dark side. But
Jacob Wilson.
Whoa, that's
literally falsified studies.
Yeah, he did.
That's what I was talking about. With
yeah. Oh, no shit. Yeah. I didn't know he did stuff like that. I thought he just bullshitted statistics.
You hear stuff.
Well, I think he got to the point where he just started making things up.
It's not hearsay. Kristen was involved in those studies.
Well, yeah, it's not hearsay at all. He lost his position and everything.
Kristen was involved in those. Remember Kristen?
Yeah.
She was involved in those, and she's like, "Yeah, fucking happened." I was like, "Oh shit, okay."
So you have that happen. There's just, that's not very often. I don't want people to like distrust research because there's a couple of bad eggs, but but the main thing is
you just can't assume all of it is like truth down given from God.
Well,
it should also be research.
But
it should also be peer-reviewed research and not just performed in my lab.
The way this system was created, peer review, it's all written, typed up, written. That's antiquated. That's before the internet.
Yeah.
We should have a video clip that accompanies.
Yes.
Here's a video clip so you can see. Then we could go,
100%.
yes, this Kubos, and the other study I have that I would like to duplicate is the seated leg curl versus the lying leg curl. Do you guys think seated leg curls are really better for hamstring growth than lying leg curls?
I don't even deal in shit like that. Like,
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
I love
hypothetically,
lying leg curls. I feel them more, but
like, so it also depends on how you place lying leg curl. Like if you put some pads underneath your legs, or if you have a machine that stretches your ham out a lot,
right.
then
If
you
you're
get a
in
huge
hip
stretch
flexion
under
a
load,
little
right?
bit, like it's
Like so, then you get a
right.
very similar effect.
Right.
Another thing about that is like when people say,
Cueing.
well, one is better than the other, it's like, well, like you're gonna never do a lying leg curl again.
Right.
What if you get tired of doing seated leg curls, even if they're like marginally
Exactly.
better? You're just gonna be like,
Yeah.
no, I don't
Also,
fucking do
some
that. Get out of here.
machines-
You use both.
Some machines you get in, you're like, this thing was made for
Yeah,
me.
exactly.
Yes, and the
I
other is
feel-
like, this machine sucks. I don't
this-
care if it's seated or
And a
standing.
lot,
right, right.
a lot of it is cueing too. Like I'll actively resist my hips moving backwards when I do a lying leg curl. So I'll keep my hips forward so that I can actually stretch the hamstring more.
Yeah, yeah.
Most people don't do that, and they don't
Right.
think about that stuff. So like, I hate lying leg curls. I'm just gonna do seated. It's like, how about you try this cue? And then they're like, oh shit, that's awesome.
But you
So
have
it's
these,
just-
you have these published studies, and it's like there's one, they have not been duplicated, and you don't know exactly how they did it because there aren't video clips. So anyway, this is a drawback of not just longitudinal, but also
For sure.
acute research, like with the numerical clues. You don't know exactly how the researchers did them. But anyway, also with longitudinal research with hypertrophy, there's some, like you can do glute girth or girth of arm girth, but
Tape
if-
measuring.
tape measuring. But like, what if you just gained a bunch of weight?
Right.
You could gain fat. You could be measuring
Very,
biceps,
very imprecise.
and the triceps could grow.
Yeah.
You know, so that's kind of on the low end. Then you have, you know, ultrasound. You've got DEXA. You've got bioelectrical impedance. You've got bod pod. You've got underwater weighing. You've got skin fold. Then you can combine them now. Now you've got like these, like, you know, 4-component models where you combine, for example, skin fold with girth, or, you know, you have CT scans, you have MRI, but you can combine modalities and then it makes it even more accurate. That's out of my league, but that's for hypertrophy. With strength, the kind of the way we measure strength, you can either look at isometric strength, concentric strength, or eccentric strength. You can use a dynamometer to measure like single joint strength. You can use a force plate. You can do a 1 rep max, or just like a rep, like rep out and use a prediction equation. Those are the ways we measure strength. Performance, we can basically, you can look at activities of daily living. If you're dealing with like elderly, like sit to stand, like this here, they increase that, they decrease that time, then they're more functional. You can look at like basically acceleration or top speed sprinting, vertical or horizontal jump. You can look at agility and change of direction tests. You can look at rotational power and things like that. But these are the ones that, these longitudinal tests are the ones that actually measure what you're trying to measure. Again, in a perfect world, we'd have 100 of these studies, but we don't. So how can we best judge? And it's like, how many of those apply to what we're talking about here? It's not like we can go, all right, lat prayer. Have you ever seen anything looking at creatine kinase or lactate of a lat prayer? No, we don't have that. But we have functional anatomy, we have the feel, DOMS, you know, we have, did it give you a pump? Does it give you a burn? Does it make sense with the, do we know momentums and pennation angles? Things like that. We can look at that and make a judgment. But I'm really against the bashing of exercises. I don't like that. I don't like, this exercise is stupid. When people say that, that really gets to me, because I'm just glad people are exercising. And if you're a trainer like me, one thing that's different about me, and I live in this Instagram age, there's no practitioners anymore. Oh, no one's actually coaching anyone anymore. I won't do
don't
that.
coach anybody.
You work with a lot of, like, you'll do workouts with people, so that's way better than just
I
training
also
yourself.
train myself.
You
Yeah.
train yourself,
No,
but you
for
also
sure.
you have
I've
strong,
trained a lot of people over the years.
You have strong workout partners. That increases your, because if you didn't, you just go by what you know. But
Sure.
you'll look at Jared, like, Jared likes this exercise, I don't. Or
Well, that's a really good point. There's something very humbling when you talk to other people about the exercises they like, and they're smart and they're strong and they've been at it for a while, and they come to a slightly different conclusion than you. Like if I was like, Jared was like, I love hack squats, and I'm like, well, I think leg presses are better. I'd be like, well, you know, Jared's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. Is it really just like, I'm correct and he's dumb?
Right.
Or maybe some bodies are built differently, or maybe both exercises are effective. A lot of that nuance gets lost, especially when people say, well, this is a stupid exercise. Like, in order to make that convincing case, because some exercises really are stupid, but usually it's kind of obvious. And in order to make a convincing case, you're going to have to show that a bunch of the stuff you talked about, most of those factors are like dumb, 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 dumb,
Well,
dumb,
give
dumb.
me an
But
example
usually
of a
there's just
stupid
like
exercise.
one sumo knees in 1/8 squat for quads.
I mean, has anyone ever prescribed that?
I'm sure.
Yes.
I've seen it on a leg press.
A
Actually,
leg press,
At
people do it
Dragon.
all the time. Like at
At
Dragon's
Dragon,
Lair,
they'll
people will leg
intentionally-
press like
they'll intentionally
this.
They have knees in on.
Yeah.
And it's like a 1/8
It's
motion.
scary to watch.
But that's just like not for thinking people, right? So you can say this exercise is stupid, but then it's relatively obvious why it's stupid. But if an exercise is stupid, except a lot of smart people use it and it seems to work for them, and half of that, all the equation factors you talked about, half of those say that exercise is probably good. Just bashing that exercise with one of those factors.
Yeah.
Like, so for example, people say, well, that sort of the diagrammatical biomechanics don't add up. Like, well, the muscle diagram says lat should be weak at this angle.
Right.
But then hundreds of people you talk to, like when I go full ROM or whatever, I do this kind of exercise that's supposed to be bad. I get crazy tension, crazy burn, crazy DOMs, crazy pump. My lats grew a ton. Oh, and by the way, there's other biomechanical reasoning that says that's good. Like the internal forces are still really high, even though the external load drops off. And then a couple of studies support that this exercise does actually provide hypertrophy. Well, just using the diagrammatical biomechanics, you'd be like, see, it doesn't make sense from this factor.
Yeah.
It ignores the 18 other factors that are in support of it.
Hence my puzzle pieces.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's why I came
Overvaluing
up
one
with
puzzle
that.
piece is not a good idea.
Right. So that's how you can kind of judge. This is how you can evaluate an expert too, who like
Sure.
not ex like we're experts.
Who's an
We're not it's cocky if we're experts, but like we are. We have a lot of expertise with weight training. We're respected in the field. But you look at the experts out there, and you're like all the legit experts would consider all the pieces of the puzzle.
Yes.
Right, 100%.
Yes.
You wouldn't have any expert that's like, no, like sensation means nothing. EMG means nothing.
Correct.
Only this. This is everything.
Yeah.
You don't. You would like only functional anatomy.
It gets the clicks.
It gets the clicks,
sure.
and with functional anatomy, you can look at things like, all right. Sometimes you can. This is why EMG comes in handy. You can be like, looking at that, this muscle should be well suited for the job. What if you measure the EMG and it doesn't register anything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
That has happened with me before.
Mhm.
I have a hypothesis as to why people are so drawn to single factor explanations. It's because, for a variety of reasons, obviously lack of intelligence could be one of them, but also an intimidation with complexity and nuance
Absolutely.
leads people to just want one thing to be the answer. And if you draw a pretty picture, a little coloring book, medical diagram, and they're like, this is how that works, do that, then they can say, oh, fuck it. Like, I just have the answer. I don't have to wade into the swampy waters of like, I got to take a agglomeration of evidence from a bunch of factors. I don't even know what fucking agglomeration means. I'm pretty sure I just made that word up.
Cool
It's
part,
funny.
cool part of this video is that you're providing that puzzle though, because it's, at least to me, it seems very simplistic. That there's like a 3-tiered system. Here's what we can look at here. Here's what you can look at here.
Right.
Here's all the shit that's like very
With those-
complex that you don't necessarily have to look at.
Right.
It's those people
But
that
this stuff
forced
is-
me to make this because I was like,
Sure.
I'm tired of getting. I don't think those guys realize that we're getting
sure.
bashed. You're
For sure.
causing us to get bashed all the time from doing exercise that we like and feel.
I mean, especially in category 1, we use that on our templates. Like soreness and pump are 2 of our proxies for
Yeah.
should the volume increase from
Like,
week to
that's
week.
literally how we're doing it. Like, our
That's literally how we
templates
do it.
auto-regulate. And it's like, if you're getting a pump and it's really good, you don't have to do any more sets. You're doing a good job.
Yeah.
If you're getting super sore, you don't have to do any more sets.
Right.
And people are like, that doesn't work like that. I'm like, okay, but describe me how it works.
Exactly.
Like, you're going to have,
Yeah.
can you imagine have a client that's like you're halfway through a workout. They're like, my glutes are so blown up. I can barely move. You're like,
Right.
all right.
Keep going.
And they keep going. You're like, well, how many
That
more
means
sets? Like,
nothing.
until whatever,
done.
10. We wrote 10 down. That's
We
what we
wrote
have to
10,
do.
just
Like,
stick it at 10.
okay.
So it auto-regulates based on those actual factors you wrote down,
That's
which
so
is
funny.
it's awesome that you came to that conclusion too.
Real quick, to your point about people wanting a single factor, my colleague Jordan Mendeguccia, he's a researcher from Spain. He made this. He and Matt Bruggelli, he used to teach at AUT where I got my PhD. They wrote this game-changing article on hamstring injury prevention, and they talked about how people like to be reductionists. Why did you tear your hamstring, Jared? Well, Mike would go, well, it's because you don't have strong look at your quads. You don't have strong hamstrings. And then I would say it's because of your flexibility, dude. You go like this. And no, it's this. It's never one factor. It's your skeletal anatomy. If you have a larger moment. Like if you stick out further from the joint center, you're probably putting more stress on that.
Sorry, real quick. The only thing out of my head was like a skeleton diagram of like that person's like scan. It'd be like, your skeleton is what we in science call bitch made, and you're just gonna get hurt a lot.
You have a bitch skeleton, man. So then you're also the architecture of the muscle,
Right.
you know,
Maybe you're overtrained.
well, that's fatigue. Are you
Yeah,
fatigued?
all kinds of shit.
Fatigue throws off your muscle
Running
firing,
technique.
your technique, your flexibility, okay, with the hamstring, it's your core strength and your kind of like pelvic control. Because if you enter your pelvic tilt, that stretches the hamstring more. That influence, what happens to the pelvis affects the hamstring. So your glute activation, things like that might. Your core strength, your eccentric hamstring strength, your
How
flexibility.
strong the other muscles are.
Prior
Because if
injury.
you have weak hamstrings, but the rest of you's weak, you just never go fast enough to hurt your hamstrings.
Yeah, right.
But if you have
True.
enormous glutes and quads, like your hamstrings are on a fucking string, that sucks.
Who's the PT people that like reduce everything back to the glutes? They're saying everything that's possibly wrong with you is the glutes.
That's awesome.
Dude,
That's a joke, right?
No, it's an actual.
Wait, you're not talking about me, are
it's-
you?
no,
yeah, that sounds like me.
It's this PT out there that's like everything wrong with you is because of your
Sinks.
weak
Whoa,
glutes.
weird.
Because
Shrinks
of your weak
into
glutes.
his.
Can you imagine
Yeah,
like you get
everything,
hurt,
yeah.
you go to the doctor, he's like measures your glute strength, like, dude, aren't you the glute guy? Okay, like you shouldn't be hurt. This doesn't make any sense. Like,
Makes no
I hurt my
sense.
elbow falling down. Like, nope, it's all the
It's because your
glutes.
glutes are
It's
weak.
your glutes.
Yeah.
But it's also prior injury, because that
Yes.
if you have
Yes.
a bone, if you break your bone, it heals back stronger. If you do have soft tissue injury, it's going to have slightly biomechanically
Don't I know.
inferior.
And the scar tissue
My
that replaces
hamstrings-
the active tissue.
My
Yeah,
hamstrings are
dude.
freaking screwed now because I have ACL hamstring graft. So
Oh.
anytime I go to my like 4-range of motion to my ass, like with a single leg ham curl, I just cramp.
Yep.
It's just weak. It's super weak.
So it's a multifaceted, but people
sure.
want the simple single answer where we tend to be reductionist because it's just a simpler.
Yes.
This is why this happened for this reason. It's really a blend of reasons.
yeah.
Yep. And what's going to happen is you're just going to, by being a reductionist, and if you buy into the sort of diagrammatical process as the king way of knowing, you're just going to rule out a lot of exercises that are good and like artificially condense your variation to like 2 or 3 movements. And then what happens when you get, hurt on one of them? Or what happens when one of them gets stale on you? Like, what do you out?
Oh, God.
Well, there's only
So-
one best lat exercise. So,
so-
when that one's stale after 8 months of continuous
Yeah.
training, do you switch to nothing? Do you just take
So this
time
is
off?
my point with these guys are outing themselves that they're not real coaches. They're not real trainers.
They don't
See,
really train themselves either.
Well, so exactly, because I work with so many people. I have probably 40 different people I work with in person, okay? And God, I'm writing programs every night. And I'm always trying to make it interesting for them. So it's the same but different philosophy. Like we're always doing variations of squats, deadlifts, hip thrusts, single leg movements, upper body presses, upper body pulls, single isolation movements. But it's always like, oh God, I've been training this person for 5 years. I know what she wants. I know what her goals are, but I also know she needs some new stuff. So we like real people work with a lot of people. We love exercises. We love variations. We see something we're like, not saying these like foo-foo crazy things, but we like, what are the ways to work your lats in isolation? There's not many.
Within the constraint of what is a good exercise, it's not one. It may be 5 or 10.
Yeah.
And then 5 or 10 exercises is something you could rotate in and out.
Yeah,
But if you're
5 or
looking
10,
for the one
sure.
best exercise,
And then
all right.
So when those people say things, and also when they say things like everyone should be squatting with a narrow stance,
Oh,
that just
silly.
shows that you
as
don't.
soon as you say everyone,
Yeah.
fuck. Everyone has a heart. That's probably correct. Maybe not even. Some people have mechanical hearts.
Yeah. So you say that something, you don't really work with people because, every time I see some black and white statement, I go, that would work with these clients. That would not work with these clients. And that's what I guess frustrates me is that these people, I think what gets them making these posts is I remember when I moved to a new school in 3rd grade, I had no friends. And I realized if I started swearing a lot, that I got attention. I don't even think
Is that my life now? I still don't have any friends, so that didn't work.
I
Please
wouldn't even
continue.
make any sense. I'd just be like, fuck, shit, bitch, ass,
That's so cool. I would have thought you were so cool.
and people were like, whoa, the new guy is hardcore. So,
It's amazing.
so I think that happens on social media. If you make a post and you're bashing an exercise and it's your most popular post, you're like, oh my God, they like me.
Keep doing
Yes,
it.
then you keep doing it.
I'm going to do more of it.
Yeah.
And they're not thinking globally of what's best for the field.
Sure.
They're just thinking of themselves. They're thinking of that, they're not thinking of what's best for the field and what's best. And they're also, when you're out there trying to save the world and you think that you can come up with some, some revelation every week,
Right.
you're reaching. You did not do the
big
homework
time, big time.
necessary. Like how often do the three of us
Revelations
come
in
up?
the field come every couple of years.
Yeah,
I've never had a revelatory moment. When I'm on psychedelics, sure, but those aren't real revelations. Like the elephant's my friend. You don't have an elephant, Mike. Like he was my friend while I had him. That's all I have to say.
So like if you're coming up with stuff every month,
Yeah.
that's like, guys, I just figured this out. This
It's always
doesn't-
controversial too.
Yeah.
It always calls out a lot of people. Like
Yeah.
somebody has to be the villain. Like
Yeah.
these trainers making you
So-
do glute thrusts are idiots and they're
So,
wrong.
that-
and they
so
get ripped
that's
off.
what I wrote this years ago. It's so funny. Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
I wrote these blog posts in 2010. Here's the way they do it. And it's the same thing.
Yeah.
You come up with your own terminology for the exercises.
I've done
These
that.
ones are good. These ones are bad. And then, you always have to have a villain so that you can emerge as the hero,
Folks, Brett's pissed. Jared remains always pissed. Me, I'm a happy-go-lucky guy. I just want to be friends with everyone. Actually, anyone. Please be my friend. We'll probably link the thing, and if we don't, it's Brett's fault. Jared, what are you up to now? Got any announcements? Anything to say?
I'm sick.
Jared's sick. He lost his voice. It doesn't actually sound that tough.
Hell.
Brett actually looks like a pirate, sounds like a super tough guy, has a deep voice. I don't have a deep voice, and I'm really conscious about that all the time. Jared just is sick. Usually his voice sounds like Harry Potter in the first movie. Anything else to say, announce, anything? Got any more hate to throw out in the universe?
Thanks for coming here and doing this, and look forward to how this transpires and moving forward, hopefully.
That was the least convincing thing you've ever said.
I hope to move forward.
See you guys next time.